I'm currently recording the audiobook for my new book, Truth Be Told. So this week, I thought I would upload the audio from the introduction to the book. I think it gives a good sense of what the book is about and the general territory and philosophical terrain that it covers. If you'd like to order Truth Be Told, you can do that at jenhawk.com or at the links below if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're interested in the audiobook, that will be available later in August, but you can pre-order that now if you'd like as well. I hope you enjoy the chapter, and I will be back soon. Introduction. The Crappening. This section begins with two quotes. The first from Carl Jung. Quote, "My book was declared rubbish. I was a mystic, and that settled the matter." End quote. And the next from Kevin Phillips. Quote, "Any ideology that enjoys success first fulfills itself and then indulges in some hubris." End quote. This book is an offering to some very angry gods. It circumambulates the place I find myself now, having gone through a very dark night of the soul this past winter, a period of time henceforth known as the Crappening. It is not a definitive how-to manual or magnum opus about anything in particular, but rather a stream of consciousness exploration of some of the themes and questions that have most consumed my interest and attention since my life completely fell apart. Like Dante, I woke up midway through the journey of my life and realized that everything was terribly, terribly wrong. As a field guide to my tour of Mount Purgatory since that time, this book is sometimes academic, sometimes philosophical, sometimes clinical, always personal. Central to what I have to say here are two core general ideas. Number one, our unconscious life is very real and has very powerful effects in our life. We know almost nothing about who it is that we really are. And number two, telling the truth all the time and finding the willingness to tolerate the consequences that follow from that is the only thing that can ultimately reveal those undiscovered aspects of the self to us. These are, I realize, rather radical suggestions that diverge considerably from previous dogmatic philosophical positions that I have publicly held. That's how dark nights of the soul work. If we surrender to the alchemy of real breakdown, and we still emerge the same person, ego intact, on the other side, something went very awry. And I am not the same person I was last year. The Crappening burned it all down. I owe much of my current approach to navigating Mount Purgatory to Carl Jung, who makes many appearances throughout this book. But I am not a Jungian any more than I am an evolutionary psychologist. I am just as critical of aspects of Jungian thinking as I am critical of EP. And that is exactly as it should be. The moment we can't question a particular worldview, we have left the realm of science and philosophy for that of religion. I don't do dogma. I am, at the end of the day, merely a Jen Hawkian. I am on my own path of unconcealing and understanding. That path has brought me here with this book, and it will take me to new unknown places after this. It never ceases to amaze me how intolerant most people are of other people changing their mind and evolving their understanding. We so prefer the security of remaining stagnant, static, rotten, and dead, as Marion Woodman puts it. We would do almost anything rather than change, and we resent others when they do. Jung famously broke ranks with Freud because Freud's analytic psychology enforced hard limits on its interpretation of the world. Jung yearned for more meaning, for continued exploration, and for a framework that did not just view our unconscious life as repressed sexual expression. I can relate. Like Jung, I cannot agree to epistemological constraints that seem to be there for no good reason. I have found evolutionary psychology an exciting and powerful, but ultimately incomplete, framework from which to understand the most difficult aspects of individual human suffering and unhappiness. I've come to see EP as an intrepid and rugged jeep that can get you very far indeed, but at some point at the foot of the smoldering volcano, the guide kicks you out and says, "You're on your own the rest of the way." The Crappening made me keenly aware in my own life of all the ways that I needed to change. And while an evolutionary psychology approach provides many useful heuristics and explanations for why we do certain things, it does not provide very many tools for how to change. Indeed, just the opposite. EP made me quite hopeless about the prospects of meaningful change. It convinced me instead that I was more or less doomed to whatever life my genetic code spelled out for me. But that simply is not the case as long as we remain unaware of and unwilling to grapple with the single greatest distortion that runs through most of our lives, which is our own dishonesty. It is my contention in this book, and in general, that the truth really can set us free. But the problem with the truth, with real, radical, total truth, is that you can't very well predict where that freedom will take you. And as soon as most of us run into a conflict between where it seems like truth might be taking us and how we would prefer to exert control over our lives and the people around us, truth tends to lose every time. We believe we want freedom until it conflicts with all of the ways that we know to keep ourselves safe. Telling the truth, really telling the truth, as an all-consuming practice that touches every part of your life, is an act of faith. You have to make a decision to trust truth more than you trust yourself. And that does not come easily, because we learned so early and so often that truth only seems to get us in trouble. It disturbs or disappoints other people, and it causes them to remove their attention and love. So we choose instead to live our lives in a facade, or a series of facades, always ready to impression manage our way out of a bad outcome. In the war against our own fear, truth is the first casualty. And the first time we abandoned it, and therefore abandoned ourselves, we probably weren't even verbal yet. Living a lie comes so easily and serves us so well most of the time that truth-telling is only for the desperate and the insane. I only committed to the truth when my life absolutely went to shit, when everything stopped working. I got to a point where my best attempt to keep all of the plates in the air produced such huge feelings of resentment and self-disgust inside my soul that I simply couldn't live with myself anymore. It just wasn't sustainable. I had encountered what Marion Woodman describes as deep rage, and I had no choice but to smash the mask if I wanted to live. Quote, "Children not loved for who they are do not learn how to love themselves. Their growth is an exercise in pleasing others, not in expanding through experience. As adults, they must learn to nurture their own lost child. There's personal anger, but underneath there's often universal rage. And when we are possessed, God help the man who's on the end of that. Deep rage is not about the man. Deep rage is this: nobody ever saw me. Nobody ever heard me. As long as I can remember, I've had to perform. When I tried to be myself, I was told, that's not what you think. That's not what you ought to do. So just like my mother and her mother, I put on a false face. My life became a lie. That's deep rage. We have lived our lives behind a mask. Sooner or later, if we are lucky, the mask will be smashed. Marion Woodman. When you pull on the thread of truth, everything will unravel. The core fears you've been running from your entire life, rejection, humiliation, oppressive engulfment, whatever they are, they will file into your life one by one or all at once, if you're like me, demanding to be acknowledged. Not just intellectually, but physically too. And fear feels bad. I don't sugarcoat that. And that's why truth is only for the desperate or insane. There's no reason to do this unless you need your life to change. And if you do, well, welcome aboard. I've written this for women, and maybe a few men here or there, who are like me. Women who are crawling out of their own skin with a lifelong feeling of self-betrayal. The hallmark is feeling like someday your life can begin. Someday, when everything lines up just right. Someday, when someone, it's not clear who that would be exactly, finally gives you permission. Truth does set us free. It frees us to discover who it is that we really are for the first time in our lives. And it gives us the freedom to experience staying with our newly discovered self, come what may. When we realize that we can experience rejection or invalidation or abandonment in a relationship and also remain in truth, and that we can trust ourselves to stay in our body and hang with ourselves and be present for our suffering through that, we encounter an immovable foundation of self-trust that no one can take from us. And from there, the world begins to contain real possibilities again.